if you can challenge yourself to pause and give yourself time to fully step into who you are supposed to be and demonstrate that kind of patience, work ethic, commitment, good things will come your way.
This is a journey.
Let me take you on a journey.
There will still be the journey.
The journey.
New sheriff in town, and his name is
The journey.
Journey.
This thing is bigger than Nino Brown. This is
The journey.
The journey.
What is it that moved you?
The journey. The journey. The journey. The journey. The journey.
Welcome back to another episode of The Journey. I'm your host, Larry Robinson, and today we got another Memphis icon. We are not going to let you down. But before we go there, we're going to go and visit with Maya Angelou, who is the author of our quote of the day. That quote is, "Life is not measured by the number of breaths you take, but by the moments that take your breath away." And what that means to me is, it is the journey. It's the fact along the way, many times that life is just, you're going to have these breathtaking moments. But today we got a brother who has had many breathtaking moments. And he's Dr. Russell Wigginton, straight out of Louisville, Kentucky, by way of Nashville, matriculated to Memphis, educator, father, husband, author, education executive. Now he's the president of the National Civil Rights Museum. Told you, we're going to keep bringing him. Today we got Brother Russell Wigginton. What's up, Russ?
Hey, my friend, good to be here.
Great to have you. And plus, he's my homeboy, straight out of Louisville, Kentucky. So tell me, early years. Give him a little Cliff Notes version of your early years back in Louisville.
Well, living in Louisville, Kentucky, there's a couple things that come with that territory. You better cheer for the Cardinals.
One.
And if you think you got any basketball skills, you better hone them with care. But it's also a community that people gather, convene, support each other.
Tell me about your home life, back at the house, early years.
Yeah, I had a wonderful home life. My father was a Howard graduate.
Okay.
To go to Howard in 1960 was saying a lot coming from Louisville, Kentucky.
Absolutely.
So come from fifth generation college student when I went to college. So I had that kind of expectation.
So college was never
a question. My great-great-grandfather was the first African-American physician in Jackson, Tennessee.
Okay.
And so I have this long tradition on that side where education was focused on.
Right.
And on my mother's side, she was just and still is, just a warrior.
Okay.
She was so invested in us.
Okay.
Made the kind of sacrifices that you make when you want your children to succeed.
Outside of your mother and father, who had the biggest impact on young Russ Wigginton?
That's a tough question. I'm going to say my grandmother, my dad's mom. Miss Suella is what we called her. She invested in all of us. We were accountable to her.
Okay.
She had this warmth mixed with intensity that made us all be focused on doing what's right and reaching our full potential. That's what she talked about all the time.
Younger years, you make decisions. What decision did you make as a young person that ultimately ended up to be life impacting, although you didn't know it at the time?
I would say when I moved to, we moved to Nashville.
Okay.
My father was a executive for L&N Railroad.
Okay.
And he had an opportunity to move the family to Nashville, Tennessee. And upon that move,
What age?
12.
12, okay.
So pretty important moment.
Right.
Very influential time. I go from a familiar community in Louisville where I'm comfortable to an unfamiliar place in Nashville.
Okay.
And I felt like, how am I going to fit in? I go to a parochial school. I'm one of two black students in my class. And
Now, that wasn't the case at St. Anne.
that was not, so that's not the case at the Catholic schools in Louisville at
Right,
the time. So
right.
I'm now in an environment where I'm used to the Catholic education. I grew up Catholic,
Right.
but my peers are overwhelming majority white, and I have to adjust to that.
Okay.
And I decide that there are two areas where I'm going to stand out:
Okay.
on the basketball court and in the classroom.
Wow. Okay. Okay.
That's how I'm going to make my mark.
How different are you from the person you dreamed you would be as a kid?
Probably not that different.
Really?
Probably not that different.
So you didn't have the hoop dreams, football, fireman, any of that, police chief?
So I think because of my grandmother's influence and then my background, I always had sports calibrated in a certain way.
Right.
I knew it could pave some ways for me.
Right.
My goal early on was to have sports pay for my college education.
Okay, well.
And so I chose my college. I turned down scholarships and chose scholarships based on the academic institution.
Okay.
So once I got to a place where I could have my education paid for through sports, I declared victory.
Okay, okay. When did you know you was going to be okay, Russ? At what point in your life did you say, you know what, I can do this thing called life?
I'll let you know when I get there. No. I would say, like a lot of young people, even if you get through college and you get a job where you show signs of potentially being what's called success.
Right.
I think when I got my first job and I was promoted for the first time and I had to relocate to Youngstown, Ohio.
Okay.
As a 23-year-old in the late 1980s,
Right.
to move to a totally different community by yourself.
Right.
This is pre-cell phone and digital and all of those
Youngstown,
things.
though. Youngstown, Ohio?
Youngstown, Ohio.
Ooh.
So I go to a place where that's declining in population.
Oh, yeah.
It's a tough community, but I had a great opportunity with the company I was with, and so I took it. But spending that much time by myself, really reflecting on what I wanted, who I could be, had I reached my full potential,
Right.
it served me well because I grew up a lot in those 2 years, and that made me double down on my commitment to go to graduate school and pursue a PhD.
What's your why, Russ?
I just think you have an obligation to be kind and treat people with decency and respect.
Okay.
That's my non-negotiable.
Okay.
Anybody who's ever worked with or for me will tell you I have a long fuse, but it gets really short when I witness or observe the fundamental disregard for a fellow human. I have no tolerance for it.
I got you. I got you. Last question of this segment. Most of us know, especially black men, the moment that you realize that you are an African American man or a black man, what was that moment like for you?
I was in the second grade.
Okay, hold on for a quick second. Listen, we're going to be right back with The Journey on the Kazukian Network with Dr. Russell Wigginton. Don't go anywhere because you know I'm going to come looking for you if you do. We'll be right back. Welcome back. Before we left, we were talking to Dr. Russell Wigginton about when he realized that he was a black man. Russ?
A black boy.
Okay, so what happened?
I got a black boy and a black man story.
Okay.
But I was in the second grade. I mentioned
wow.
that we had moved to Nashville later in life, but we moved to Evansville, Indiana before that.
Okay.
And moved back to Louisville, then we moved to Nashville.
Okay.
So my dad got transferred and we moved. And so that allowed me to adjust
Okay.
And learn how to navigate all kinds of spaces. So in the second grade, we moved to Evansville, Indiana. I'm the only black student in the entire school.
Wow.
Around the corner from our house.
Okay.
And I remember walking in that school and seeing no black people. And while people were kind to me, there were moments where I felt like I was on display. I didn't really know what that meant.
Right.
But you can't help but to feel different.
Right.
Fortunately, I had parents who reinforced to me who I was and where I came from. Okay. But you can imagine, as what kids do, I got called out of name.
Absolutely.
And had to figure out how to navigate that, how to both defend myself verbally and physically.
What kind of strategies did you use? Do you remember using?
I remember being very observant.
Okay.
I'm still very observant. I read people. I read their cues. I read their energy. Mm-hmm. And I had to navigate who demonstrated warmth and support for me.
Right.
And those who didn't, I stayed away from.
Makes sense to me. Makes sense to me. Let's go back to your early childhood. I want to go back to Evansville.
Yeah.
What was it like? Who was in the household with you all back in Evansville?
It's my parents and at the time, my sister. I have a much younger brother who did not come along until we moved to Nashville. That's right. He was definitely, I was 13 and my sister was 11 when he came along. We lived in a apartment.
Okay.
My dad was doing work for the railroad. Okay. Part of his, if you think about, he was in his early 30s. Finding himself professionally, developing his career. Right. My mom stayed at home some of the time, but then she worked as a executive assistant for a corporation there.
Right.
But it was a very close-knit. We didn't know anybody when we moved there, so we spent a lot of time together. And I think that foundation is the kind of thing that when we moved to Nashville later, it was like a piece of cake.
During your early years, what's a fond memory that jumps out that like, oh man, that just brings a smile to my face every time I think about it?
I played baseball, basketball, and football growing up, and baseball was my favorite sport until I got to high school. Okay. And the summer before we moved to Nashville, I knew it was my last summer there, and I played playing summer league baseball, and we were playing in the city championship, and I pitched a no-hitter.
Really?
And I saw my name in print for the first time.
Wow.
Wigginton Hurls no-hitter.
Oh, my goodness.
I threw really hard, but I was wild. I'm glad it didn't say how many people I walked. But I struck out a lot of people and did not give a hit, and we won the city championship.
Fantastic. Now, that's an amazing story. Worst story. What's a horrible story? One that you leave that back there.
I remember a time, I think I was in the 9th grade.
Okay.
And there was a situation where someone I knew was being mistreated.
Right.
And I was a bystander. And it was a moment where I determined if ever I'm in this situation again, I will not be a bystander.
Okay.
Someone was being mistreated, someone who had special needs at my school. And people were inappropriately picking on this person, and I didn't step in.
Right. That moment had an impact on you.
I felt guilty. I felt a responsibility that I should have, because I also recognized that I was well respected.
Right.
And had I stepped up and said, fellas, enough, it probably would have gone away. I didn't participate, but by not participating, in some ways, I let it continue.
Right.
And that is connected to my commitment to making sure people get treated with dignity and respect when I'm to the best of my ability.
Tell me about your first college experience, going from high school to college. You always knew you were going to college, I'm pretty sure, based on the family background. But what went into that decision? Because you didn't go to an HBCU, did you?
No, I went to Rhodes College
Okay.
here in Memphis, Tennessee, and it was an interesting process. Again, it was a lot different than now. You waited on letters to come in the mail. I was being recruited by different colleges for basketball.
Right.
Mostly Division II and NAIA type schools,
Right.
and I was open to that. But many of the schools that were recruiting me really just focused on basketball.
Okay.
And they didn't talk enough about academics.
Okay.
And I wasn't willing to just go to a school for basketball. I needed to choose an institution that I felt like was going to push me and challenge me and set me up for post-college life.
Now, we know you went to Rhodes. What was the number 2 school? What school did you almost go to?
Howard.
Really?
It's my dad's alma mater.
Okay.
Grew up visiting, taking train rides to D.C.
Absolutely.
And if my dad was very hands-off in that process. If he would have said, son, I think you would have a great experience at Howard, I would have made that decision.
Any regrets that you didn't?
No regrets.
Okay.
No regrets because I did get a chance to play basketball at Rhodes. I got a chance to be exposed to Memphis.
Right.
And I got a chance probably to have some leadership opportunities at a place like Rhodes that may or may not have happened at Howard. I got a chance to be Black Student Association president. My junior year, I got a chance to engage in Memphis in a very important way for me. Given some of the places I mentioned that I had lived, to be in a city as black as Memphis,
Right.
and to be exposed to all that this great culture brings,
Right.
it was transformative.
I'm sure it was. What role did Rhodes play in your development as a newly graduated executive? Because you didn't go right to grad school, or did you?
No, I worked for 5 years
Okay,
after
okay.
college. It prepared me beautifully.
In what way?
The thing about when you get, I'm biased towards liberal arts educations. I will own that.
Right.
The thing about when you get a liberal arts education is you learn how to write,
Right.
and you learn how to take advantage of all your analytical capacities,
Okay.
regardless of your major.
Okay.
And so when I graduate with a history degree, we didn't have minors back then, but I had an equivalent to a minor in business.
Okay.
I'm interviewing with Fortune 500 companies, and they're asking me to do writing samples, and I can write,
Yes.
relatively speaking, right, to a new graduate. And when they're putting scenarios in front of me, I'm accustomed to that kind of analytical thinking. Now, that happens at a lot of institutions.
Right.
But for me in particular, Rhodes really sharpened those skills for me. Okay. And then when you learn how to write and you learn how to think, then that enables you to be a good communicator.
You came back to Memphis, and at that point, where'd you get your PhD?
University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign.
Oh, and how did you get there?
So working for 5 years in corporate America in sales and marketing,
Right.
all over the country. I was hired in Nashville. They moved me back to Memphis. I moved to Youngstown, Ohio. Then I moved to Boston.
Okay.
I was doing well in that career, and I felt like if I'm going to go back to graduate school, if I'm going to give up this good job to go be a graduate student in history,
Right.
I'm only going to go to top 20 programs.
Okay.
And so I only applied to top 20 history programs in the country.
Now, all the stuff I've known about you, I never knew you were at University of Illinois. What was that experience like? And then how did you get to Memphis from there?
Sure, I loved my time at University of Illinois. I go in, I'm a little older than somebody coming out of college, so I'm 27.
Okay.
I've had responsibility before, so I'm a little more mature and ready for that transition. I serve as my grad assistantship was the Bridge Transition academic advisor for the athletic department.
Oh.
So I get a tie with athletes, and I get to work with these mostly young men who have aspirations of going professional.
Right.
Playing in the Big Ten, many of them do.
Right.
So I'm able to help reinforce that for them. I understand what that's like, having been a college athlete.
Right.
But I'm also able to talk to them about the importance of getting your lesson.
Right.
And that when you tie those things together, you have even more opportunity. So I got a lot of fulfillment out of working with them. I also had given up a paycheck to be a poor graduate student again. So I wasn't messing around.
Right.
I was focused.
Right.
And so I completed my coursework in 3 years, and I applied and received a William Randolph Hearst Fellowship, the Hearst Foundation out of New York.
Okay.
And Rhodes reached out to me. They were a school that accepted Hearst Fellows.
Right.
It was a teaching and research fellowship. So I returned to Rhodes to work on my dissertation and teach a class a semester.
Okay.
And it was a 2-year fellowship that turned into 23 years.
Wow. Wow. So tell me, when did marriage and all of that get into the mix?
Yeah, so I was married from 1993 to my college sweetheart, who was also became a professor at Rhodes.
Okay.
And we were married until 2010.
Okay.
And had a long career at Rhodes, and my career continued at Rhodes.
Okay.
I recently remarried. In fact, March 23rd is my 2-year anniversary.
Congratulations.
To Tamika Hart. Many
Okay.
people in Memphis know her from
Right.
her contributions in the community.
Absolutely.
And so family life is really important to me. I have a son who will graduate in May from the University of Richmond.
Congratulations.
An outstanding young man who is a lot smarter than his daddy. He's done extremely well. I'm very proud of him. He would graduate with honors in psychology in May.
Regrets. The first marriage. Was there ever a moment that you look back and say, I could have done that differently?
You know, I have a unique situation. People tell me. My first wife and I continued to be friends.
Okay.
We co-parented our son, and that was very intentional.
Okay.
We did and continued to.
Was that a hard thing to do initially, was working with an ex-wife?
You know, because of our relationship, no. We had talked through it. We felt like it was the right decision, and we were committed to, if our marriage wasn't going to last, we didn't want it to end negatively. I mean, those are tough situations, but they're real situations. But the fact that we continued to work at Rhodes together for 6 or 7 years
Oh, okay.
after we weren't married.
Okay.
And so one of the things I'm proudest of is our ability to maintain a civil relationship and a friendship.
How did that divorce shape you as a man?
That's a great question. It's humbling. I hadn't failed at much,
Right.
especially things that I had taken seriously.
Right.
And this was an end of a long relationship. We had done things the right way. We dated for 6 years. We waited 6 years before we had our son.
Right.
And so all of the steps you're supposed to take, we were committed to. And sometimes people change, situations change, and the ability to move forward. It took me a while to process that actually wasn't necessarily a failure. We had both given it our best shot.
Right.
And a failure would have been to not be able to move forward productively and to be able to co-parent and co-support our son.
Now listen, I think that's a very important statement that Dr. Wigginton just made, in that he had to overcome. He still overcame, and he still worked through it, and he became better because it became a learning situation. So I want to put a pin right there, because I want you as a listener and a viewer to know that sometimes you're going to fall down. You're going to fall down, but you got to get back up and use it as a learning experience. Let's move on to, you also an author.
I am. I don't even think about it that much.
Really?
I don't.
A published book, and you just
Well, it was a lot of work.
Okay.
But my book's been out it came out in 2006.
Okay.
But it was such a personal undertaking.
Okay.
It wasn't about how many books am I going to sell, is this going to make me popular or famous or anything like that. It was a personal journey.
Okay.
Because I had a book contract prior to the book that I published.
Oh.
That came from my dissertation.
Okay.
And I decided to not publish that book because what the publisher wanted me to do was change the book in ways that I wasn't willing to.
Right.
And so I published a few articles from that manuscript.
Okay.
So to write the sports book that I did was really more of a personal fulfillment. I felt compelled. I have to do this. I have to talk about race in sports and heroes like you and I have in Muhammad Ali,
right.
And talk about how race and sports intersect. And so because it was a personal journey, my fulfillment was I was satisfied upon completion of the book. I'm fortunate that it's still in print.
Right.
But I was satisfied 16 years ago.
Awesome. Awesome. I got a couple, man, and I'm trying because I know we're coming to the end. If you could talk to your younger self, right there sitting at the table in Louisville, Kentucky, West End, what would you say to him?
This thing called life is a marathon, it's not a sprint.
Oh, that's beautiful.
If you can challenge yourself to pause and give yourself time to fully step into who you are supposed to be and demonstrate that kind of patience, work ethic, commitment, good things will come your way. And you have to be able to look in the mirror and like what you see and like who you see. If you focus on those things, I think things will work out the way they're supposed to be.
All right, now I'm going to ask you to give everybody that's looking or listening to this a Russellism. And I want you to look right in that camera and give them a Dr. Russellism that you can leave them with today.
Don't sweat the small stuff, and 95% of it is the small stuff. Stay focused.
Sweet and succinct. Dr. Russell Wigginton is an icon in this community, president and CEO of the National Civil Rights Museum, and you got a taste of his journey. Listen, we're going to keep bringing him. Dr. Wigginton, thank you, sir.
My pleasure.
Thank you for being a part of it and sharing your journey. Listen, we're going to keep bringing him. Keep coming back. This is Larry Robinson. For our guest, Dr. Russell Wigginton, this has been The Journey on the Kazukian Network. Thank you to our partner, the Grand Boulé of Sigma Pi Phi Fraternity Delta Chapter. To hear more incredible stories like this, be sure to download the Kazukian app from the App Store or Google Play, or check out the Journey Memphis podcast on all your major podcast providers. Also, check us out on the Kazukian Network.